Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into something really complex, the high-stakes talks between the US and Iran. And honestly, it feels like we're being pulled in two totally different directions at the same time.
Yeah, those recent talks in Geneva, they've sent some seriously mixed signals. You've got this, hopeful diplomatic language on one side, but then a really tense military buildup on the other. So, how are we supposed to make sense of all this?
And really, this is the whole problem in a nutshell. Over here, it's all about diplomacy. But look over there, and you see this huge intelligence gathering operation happening over the Persian Gulf. So what's the real story? Okay, to get to the bottom of this, we really need to peek inside that negotiating room. Let's talk about what was actually said, and maybe even more important, what wasn't. So, the big takeaway here is kind of a mixed bag. The good news? The talks didn't completely fall apart, which, hey, is something. But no major breakthrough happened. That phrase you see, difficult but continuing, that pretty much tells you everything. Both sides are still at the table, but they are a long, long way from shaking hands on a deal. If you look at how the US talked about it, they were super cautious. They used the word progress, to signal things are moving, but then they hit you with severe gaps remain. That's a huge reality check, right? It's all about managing everyone's expectations. Iran, on the other hand, also used some positive language, but it felt very deliberate. When they emphasized constructive proposals, they're basically sending a message. They're saying, hey, we showed up with actual ideas. We're not just here to waste time. But maybe the most interesting take came from the Omani mediators. Now, these guys are absolutely crucial to the whole process. And when they use a phrase like significant progress, well, that suggests that maybe behind all the cautious public statements, something real is actually happening. And of course, it's not just about the US and Iran. The whole world is watching this. You've got Russia and China really pushing for the diplomacy to keep going because they want stability. But then you have a major player like Israel basically saying, don't forget about us, we'll do what we have to do. All these outside voices just make everything that much more complicated. This whole situation actually brings us to a really important idea. You might think that threatening force and talking diplomacy are total opposites. But in this case, they're actually two sides of the same coin. It's a strategy called coercive diplomacy. The whole point of the military pressure is to add a sense of urgency to those talks. So, with that in mind, let's flip over to the other side of this equation, the military chessboard. What's actually happening on the ground and up in the sky? Okay, so you're going to hear this acronym a lot, ISR. It just stands for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Basically, it's a fancy way of saying a massive coordinated effort to figure out exactly what the other side is up to, using everything from spy planes to satellites. And let me tell you, that ISR activity has been turned up to 11. We're seeing a ton of advanced spy planes and high-altitude drones just constantly circling over the Gulf. And they're all laser-focused on one of the most critical spots in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. And this isn't just random flowing around. They're looking for very specific things. The intel gathering is zeroed in on three key areas: Iran's navy, how ready their missile sites are, and what their allies in the region are doing. The end goal? To get a crystal clear, complete picture of Iran's military muscle. Now, here's a really crucial distinction that the intelligence analysts are making. They don't see this as gearing up for an attack. They're calling it a high readiness deterrence posture. Think of it like a defensive signal, a way of saying, hey, we are ready for anything you throw at us. That's completely different from what they'd call a launch window posture, which would be a huge red flag that an attack is about to happen. Okay, so let's recap. We've got these supposedly constructive talks happening over here and this super tense military situation over there. So how on earth do analysts take these two opposing pieces and figure out the actual risk of this all blowing up? Well, they have a framework for this. They're watching four key things to get a clear picture. First, the status of the talks themselves. Second, how intense is that ISR activity we just talked about? Third, are there any big logistical movements happening? And finally, and this is a big one, are there any signs of embassy evacuations? Because that is always a massive red flag. And this chart really puts it all into perspective. It shows where analysts think we are right now. If you look at the next week or so, a major US strike, that's seen as the least likely thing to happen. A smaller, limited skirmish, a little more probable, but the most likely scenario is
a 40 to 45% chance that things just stay the same, that this tense balancing act between pressure and diplomacy just keeps on going. So what that really tells us is we're probably going to be stuck in this holding pattern for at least a little while longer.
And all of this brings us to one last idea that just perfectly sums up this whole situation. You see, we're not really at peace, but we're not at war either. We're stuck somewhere in between.
And that in-between has a name. Experts call it the gray zone. It's the state of conflict that's just below the level of an actual war. It's all about ambiguity, pressure, and sending strategic signals, with both sides trying really hard to get what they want without starting a full-on fight. And really, that is the bottom line here, the big takeaway. This isn't a simple story where if diplomacy works, the military stands down. Nope. Both tracks, the talking and the threatening, are happening at the exact same time, and they're constantly influencing each other. It's an incredibly delicate, high-stakes dance.
So that leaves us with one final, really crucial question to think about. When you're in a gray zone like this, things can change in the blink of an eye. So you have to wonder, what kind of event, a miscalculation, a pure accident, or even a deliberate move, could be the spark that finally breaks this stalemate and pushes things one way or the other?